Why do you not support the hospital downtown?
Well, I don't know if I would say that I don't support the hospital concept. What I don't support is the use of eminent domain in the way that they're using it. And for a couple of reasons, I think it's just there's a lot of things that are raising red flags in my mind. Mm-hmm. So I'm suspect about a couple things. One is, first of all, why are we using eminent domain with two different entities? Utica, for the hospital footprint, we're using the what's called urban renewal, and that's being done by the city of Utica. And for the parking garage, which I believe is for the hospital, the complex at the auditorium, including the potential casino that would be put in downtown, we're using the county to do that. And it's my understanding that the county is planning on putting the garage up separately, and the cost to the taxpayers is about $43 million. And I think that's a combination of the city and county taxpayers. And what really concerns me is that I've been through eminent domain proceedings before, or eminent domain-like proceedings where people have been thrown off their property. And I referenced to you before our interview, there was a long-standing case that I worked on where 20,000 landowners throughout Oneida and Madison County were given eviction notices by the then Oneida Indian Nation, and ended up going through a lawsuit and through the court system, and ended up in the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court dismissed that case in 2011. Now I represent, up until the time I took office as a member of Congress, I represented a man named Melvin Phillips, who is a genuine Oneida Indian, who now is having his land, Ray Halberter is trying to evict him from his land, and I have proven that Ray Halberter is not an Oneida by blood, and so he's running the Oneidas against his own self-proclaimed constitution. And so I have been through I know what it's like to be forcibly removed from land, and I think that property rights are a really important right that we have as American citizens. They're unique in the United States, and so that's a long answer to your short question. But so to the question on, do I support the hospital being downtown or not? I don't feel like I'm a medical expert, and I can say the hospital, that we're going to improve the hospital or the medical community, or the delivery of excellent health care to our citizens, which I think is our obligation. Is it by building a structure in downtown or St. Luke's? I'm not sure that either one is the answer. But I do think the way in which it's being done is certainly questionable, and a lot of answers remain, a lot of questions remain unanswered on that. So I would like to see us maybe go to a permissive referendum and let the people weigh in on this and see what they really think. I would love to see other medical professionals do a real analysis of this, and instead of putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, and make sure that what we're doing is actually what's good for healthcare, and put a pause on this and look into it. And one last thing on that is I'm very concerned that we're forcing through, again, a parking garage at taxpayer expense to build a casino for an entity that nets hundreds of millions of dollars in profit that isn't paying taxes, and moving a casino into downtown Utica and some of the social costs that would be part of that. And it looks to me like this is all about making money off a casino using taxpayer money and the eminent domain proceeding, instead of preserving our tax base and our citizens that are there, and many of them generational businesses that have been there.
So if eminent domain was not used, and all the businesses, all 40 of them down there, agreed to go, would you support it being down there?
I think, it would be, if all the businesses, well, I think right now I'd like to find out if the residents still want to have the hospital there, how much coercion is being used to move businesses out of there, and are these businesses being adequately compensated? I know that some of the businesses that are in this position have indicated to me that it would cost them something like $4 million to move out and create the same facility somewhere else, and they're being offered a fraction of that by the buyout provisions as they stand. I think that's a decision the business owners have to make, but I think they're going to have a hard time using anything but eminent domain to remove people from there. But I really feel like we're bypassing the citizens and their ability to weigh in, to have credible information. We have offered, my office, to host a nonpartisan listening session where everyone can come in and talk about what their position on the hospital is, from experts to people who are just citizens to taxpayers and everyone who would be a stakeholder in this, and just come in and talk to us and say, what's your position? Is this the best use of literally hundreds of millions in taxpayer money, and is this meeting what I think should be the stated goal of producing better and more efficient health care for our really needy citizens in our communities? A lot of Medicare people, a lot of people dependent on Medicare and Medicaid, and are we really, is that building a hospital structure really, where the state-of-the-art medical community is today?
There's been a lot of news coming out about government involvement in the hospital process. Were you ever reached out to by MVHS, or have you been involved in that process?
No, nobody's ever reached out to me to discuss it with me. I was never involved in the email chain. That's deliberate because they know that I would be certainly inquiring as to the origination of what's going on in that. I certainly would love to sit down with the hospital officials. I've attended some of the events. I was a member of the State Assembly when this issue came before us, the funding of the hospital initially, and for I think a couple of the times the money was put in and the money wasn't in the budget, and then it came in again. I've spoken with the former Senator Ray Meyer, who's a lobbyist, about the issue. What's the mission here? And my understanding from the very beginning was that the whole mission wasn't necessarily to put the hospital downtown, but it was to go toward a new hospital for the region. And so, as you see from the email chain, something I had no notice of, didn't know anything about, it looks like, the hospital wasn't even intending to put the hospital downtown. The hospital was actually hoping to put it in the best place, and that somehow the politicians sort of manipulated, putting the hospital downtown. And I don't know why. I don't know what the benefit is there, other than I always look at things a little bit more cynically since my experience dealing with, Ray Halberter and some of the ways things are happening. And let's just be perfectly honest, there is a lot more money to be made on a casino than there is on a hospital. And I think our priority should be on a hospital instead of on profiteering off a casino and a complex in downtown Utica. Though I think there's some things that could benefit the downtown region, I do worry about using taxpayer money in this way.
You've been critical of the possible use of eminent domain. Do you think there's a role for eminent domain generally in terms of regional economic development?
Yeah, I think eminent domain can be used, but I think it should be something that should be really considered, especially in light of what's happening in our unique situation. We have a lot of tax-paying businesses, and as I indicated before, some of these businesses have been around for generations, and they're paying taxes, and they're in a region that's trying to emerge. Utica has some beautiful historic landmarks that they're trying to bring up, and I think to call it blight and to call it something unappealing, is just a use of a language to try to make the case that we should just bulldoze the entire downtown area. Utica is really important in terms of its history, not just for New York State, but for our nation. A lot of our region is really important in the founding of our nation, and there's a lot of historical importance. The Erie Canal was dug right in Rome, and it started the Industrial Revolution. There are a lot of wonderful remnants that are here that I think are worth preserving. But I'm not against eminent domain. I think it could be used, but I do worry that eminent domain is being used in a way that is not in the best interest of the taxpayers. And I think there are ways that we could probably do that. Again, I'm not even convinced that the hospital should be built. I'm not against making improvements to the hospital, and let's just look. I mean, I'm not an expert in the healthcare field, but one thing I've noticed, and I've met with a lot of doctors on this issue who are opposed to the hospital. I've met with a few that are supportive, but what a lot of them have said is, look, we are moving into another paradigm. We are building freestanding surgical centers all around, and some of the hospitals aren't getting the doctor services that they could get. And so I'm concerned about that as well. Are we following, the paradigm shift that's happening in the healthcare field, and are we just, putting ourselves out with a lot of debt and a lot of, a lot that maybe isn't going to improve healthcare, but it's going to be indebting taxpayers in Utica for many years to come without actually improving the healthcare solution. So again, I'm not an expert at that, but those are questions that I would raise as a person that's a business owner, as someone who's been through all the hospitals. I've served on the hospital boards. I was on the Faxton Foundation board. I've been involved with St. Luke's. I was on the St. E's School of Nursing board. And so I have a little bit of knowledge about it, not an expert in the healthcare field, just as a business person and someone who's been able to observe what's happening in the medical field. Plus, I've spent a lot of time in the hospitals with both of my parents, my father had a lot of major health problems, and my mother died in St. Luke's because she was, not because they weren't wonderful and the care wasn't phenomenal, but because there literally were not enough people to meet her needs, and there was no one there to help her. So I think we need to really refocus on providing excellent health care and then figure out the outcome from that point. So it isn't like I'm against eminent domain or against the hospital, or I have a preference for where the hospital goes, but I think we really need to realign what is our mission here. Isn't the mission to provide excellent health care and do the best that we can with the most prudent use of taxpayer money?